Hello and welcome. I'm John Minnick, the Special Projects Manager at Reagan Communications and PR Daily, and I'm thrilled to welcome all of you to the new rules of internal comms, personalized, unified, and AI powered in partnership with AppSpace. Now, before we get started with our program, some housekeeping notes. If you run into any technical issues, you can use that chat function at the bottom of your window for assistance. Additionally, please use the Q&A function to ask our speakers any questions. Again, it's the chat function for technical issues and the Q&A function for submitting questions for today's speakers. There'll be plenty of time at the end of today's session for questions. Now, the number one most asked question during a webinar is, will we get the webinar recording? And the answer to that question is within 24 to 48 hours, you will receive an email with the session recording, the slides, bonus materials, and a survey about today's session. Please take a moment to complete this survey as your feedback greatly helps us in programming future events. So be on the lookout for that. Now let's get started. When it comes to internal communications and content distribution, 85% of employees want a better experience and 69% indicate that communication is inconsistent. You can't fix that with an old school omnichannel. Today, I'm joined by the Davids, David Fleck, Senior Director of Profit and Partner Marketing at AppSpace, and David Fletcher, Vice President of Employee Communication Strategy, also at AppSpace. They'll discuss omni-creation, a way to create and distribute content so that it reaches people no matter where they are in your digital workplace. From SharePoint to Viva to Teams and beyond, they'll show you how AI-powered tools can help with automated translations and personalized content and ensuring your message lands. And now I'm happy to turn things over to the Davids.
Here we go. Okay, so real quick, so you can talk about, or so you know who's presenting to you. Again, yes, I am David Fleck. The slightly longer hair, although Fletcher is catching up to me. I am the Senior Director of Product and Partner Marketing here at AppSpace. Been here for about 5 years, and just a little bit about me. I am a technology geek, and I love kind of smart home technology. It's one of the things that I like and drew me to AppSpace because we can also do for smart workplaces, and what we do here kind of fit with what I kind of gravitate towards anyway. And just a little quick fun fact about me right now, my current TV binge is The Expanse. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but I'm so deep into it that I'm pot committed at this point. So I'm going to continue to go on. So with me, I also have David Fletcher. So David, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, David. So yeah, my name is David Fletcher. I'm the, it's quite a long-winded title, but I'm the Vice President of the Employee Communications Strategy. Basically means I'm the intranet nerd. So I've been working with intranet since, I think, 2008. In fact, my first intranet was on a product called Moss, which some of you on the call may remember. Yeah, I've been basically looking at how do we enhance comms tools, specifically in the Microsoft ecosystem historically. But I was with a company that was acquired by AppSpace 3 years ago, so probably about 10 years now, all in all. And yeah, my current TV binge is Andor. I'm not really a big Star Wars guy, but a friend of mine got me into Mandalorian, and then okay, that was pretty good. And then I watched Andor, and I was like, okay, yeah, Andor's Star Wars for adults. I apologize to any Star Wars nuts in there that I've just offended, but yeah, it's a good show.
Two nerds on the call
There you
today.
go.
I like it. All right, cool. So what are these nerds going to take you through today's agenda real quick? We are going to go over, first of all, just kind of the challenge that is evolving in internal comms in the digital workplace. Some of the things that we see, some stats that we've found in the past. We'll kind of go into the employee experience and where internal comms fits into that and what we can do as communicators. We're going to go beyond just what we've typically referred to as omni-channel as far as communication distribution and talk about what the new standard is. This idea that John brought up in the beginning of omni-creation. So I don't want to steal this thunder yet. We'll get into what that means, how AI fits into it. We'll get into some actual practical strategies for content and integration, some real world success stories, and then talk a little bit about what you can do to get started and going forward. And then in the end, we want to make sure we talk about measuring the impact that this all has and the future of where we're going. So hope that all sounds good. So without any further dilly-dallying, let's get into it. So I'll kind of start with setting the stage. What are we working with, and what are we talking about the challenges that we're facing in the digital workplace? And really, that's become where the digital workplace is not just a single destination. It is a complex combination of a lot of different tools and technology that everybody's using. But what's made that more difficult, and I don't think this is anything new to anybody, but I do like to add the context, is that we have hybrid work, and hybrid work has been here for a while and is going to continue to be here, which meant there are new ways of working. There are new expectations from depending on whether employees are work from home, work from office, or work on the road, or some combination of those. They're expecting to find information in different ways. They're using different channels, different technology to find and do their job. And so that's really created some difficulties when it comes to communications. So the main challenge we see is how do we maintain consistency and create an impact where in this complex way of working, so make it easier for everybody.
Yeah, I spent my entire life speaking to internal comms managers, and I think I've never, I mean, for literally the last 10 years, I've never had more. They're expecting to do more with less. And in a time of great uncertainty with all the tools being thrown out there, more generative AI is doing, and so many challenges that I think we're all facing. So yeah, this is definitely a question we get asked a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it leads to what we're showing here is this gap, right? Where it's creating a gap in connection between that distributed workforce. So, the different experiences, the different ways of accessing the communication that they need to be able to do their job or understand what's happening in the organization, and different access levels, all that is creating this gap in the employee experience. And so let's just a couple of things, a couple of research points here to back this up and really set the stage for what we're talking about. Every year, we do a workplace trends report here at AppSpace, where we go out and we survey thousands of employees globally and kind of understand what are they facing, what are the challenges they're facing. And this is some of the things that we've learned. The big one off the bat here is 85%, which I mean, at 85%, it might as well be everybody, say that their organization could do more to improve their employee experience. So we know employees are looking for more. So that's the start. And 26% feel that their organization doesn't prioritize a positive culture. And that's a smaller number for sure, but that's still 1 in 4 people in your organization feel like the organization's not prioritizing positive workplace culture. So these are shocking stats that we need to address, essentially. And some of this is why you kind of like, why is this happening, or what's driving some of this? And it's a lot of times it's a communication breakdown, which is why we're here today. So a couple stats to kind of back that up is that 80% of employees rank consistent communication as either very or extremely important. I don't think that's a shocking stat at all. But it is something that we need to remember that in anything, and you ask my wife, communication breakdowns are what lead to the most stress and disengagement. And so it's the same in personal lives, it's the same in the workplace. And
I
yet,
take heart. Oh, sorry,
yeah,
sorry, David. I was going to say I take heart from that first one because more than 80% actually want comms, right? That's the good news. Like they want to hear the information. They want to find it. They rank it as important. So that's like I see that as a positive one, that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is the next one goes right to what you're saying is that, okay, we want this communication, but yet 69% say that the organization is delivering it inconsistently across different channels. Not only are they getting it in different channels and don't know where to get it, but once it gets there, it's not the same message all the time. So that inconsistency is what leads to this communication breakdown. Excuse me. So what are we going to do? How do we fix this? What's our job as communicators in internal comms? If we're at the forefront, what do we need to be thinking about? So let's kind of break it down in step by step. So effective internal communication is the cornerstone of a great employee experience. All right, we know that it's been proven time and time again. We know that when we do that, well-informed employees actually they feel different. They feel like they matter. They feel valued. They connect to the company. And when they do that, they're engaged. They feel connection to the brand. They internally and externally, they become kind of advocates of the company, which has a lot of effect internally that, that brings people up, that promotes collaboration, and better work and better production. And then externally, they're promoting your brand to your customers, your prospects. So well-informed employees already feel more connected. And that leads to this positive experience. And now they feel more engaged because they're having a positive experience. The photo we chose here, I'm not quite sure she's having the most positive experience, and maybe we need to focus on her a little bit more, because I don't know if she is at risk of leaving, and that's the last part, is this retention. The more engaged and positive experience your employees have, the better chance you have to retain them, and that's a great thing because we all know how much it costs to go out and find new employees to replace any that leave. So it kind of leads to this thing where we're saying, like, internal comms, we are the experience architects, because it all starts with effective internal communication. We need to be able to architect that, all the tools that we have to promote and create this positive experience to get all of these things that we're talking about. All right, so just a quick question for the audience, and you can throw it in the chat. But how many communication channels or tools do you think your team manages today? Or do you think your employees and colleagues have to go and use to find the information they need? My guess is that it's quite a bit. So if you throw that in the chat, that'd be interesting to see some of the answers as they pop up. Too many to count is probably my favorite answer so far. 8. 5 to 10, 5 to 7. Simplified it to 3. That's fantastic.
Nice.
About 7. Okay, yeah, you can see that the numbers are pretty consistent. I love the 3 and 4, and that's a good news to hear that too. So, just think about this, right? Think about how they stack up, and you get to that number. Intranet, okay, we got to go there. Email, I got to check that every day. That's not going to die, unfortunately. Teams or Slack or both sometimes. Digital signage, I need to, I'll walk by the office. Your mobile apps, that's just the beginning of the list a lot of times. And if you think about it more and more, those numbers probably even go up. They just stack on top of each other. And what that leads to is this difficulty we talked about before of maintaining that consistent message across all these platforms. That becomes a big struggle for us as internal communicators. But for our employees that we're communicating to, they can start to get information overload, because that's great. If we've found a way through omni-channel publishing or something to make sure that every channel of communications has the message in it, well, now that starts to lead to information overload because they're getting everything all the time, everywhere. And that also has negative effects. There isn't more important or less important information out there. It's about relevancy. There's more relevant information to me and less relevant information to me. And what I want to see is what I want to see and what I need, where I need to get it. And if I'm getting all of it and it's a bunch of irrelevant communications, that's going to feel like information overload, and that's going to have a negative effect as well.
It's funny you say that, no more information. It's about relevancy. It's not about what's more important. I was with a customer a couple of weeks ago and we were replacing an old intranet, and they said, "Oh, we have this this must read feature." And I said, "Okay, show me how it works." And they showed me 38 must reads that hadn't been read. So, sometimes importance doesn't always make its way down to the reader.
Exactly, and that's exactly, I think, what this quote is about here from George Bernard Shaw, is that the single biggest problem in communication is just the illusion that it has taken place. Because I guarantee you, whomever it was that sent out those must-read notifications and messages is like, I did their job. I've communicated with them. But if they all sit in the must-read and nobody ever read them, did communication actually happen? I'd say no. So we need to start thinking about, how are we measuring this, and what can we do to really ensure that communication is actually taking place. And so a couple here, I'm not even going to let it build. I'll just let you read the bullets here. But a couple things to think about in combating this illusion, right, is that broadcasting, just sending it all out there, isn't the same as connecting. So did they see it? Did they understand it? You don't know. It's just out there. do you know, did they actually receive the message and interpret it? They could interpret it completely different ways. And especially in this noisy world, as we're calling it here. But okay, you broadcast it out. Are you even getting their attention, or is that must read buried in a list of 37 other ones? And so, is it just getting buried in the noise that's out there? And so, what I said before was understanding: did they see it? Did that reach them? Well, the traditional metrics we use are kind of open rates and views, and those are good indicators, but they don't always tell the full story. So let's go beyond what we've gotten used to. And the last one I put is get feedback. And by that, I don't mean you have to like get a very specific NPS or EPS, survey or something like that, but include in your communication ways to engage. So a poll, encourage comments, likes, and shares, and all this. That back and forth, that bi-directional. Now you understand. Yes, it hit them. Plus, the way that they've responded to it or engaged with that. Now you're getting to understand. Did they understand the message that we're trying to get out to them, or is this landing? So that can add to the full story of did it just reach them?
And I think when you look at that as well, a lot of times, and it was really heartening to see the threes and the fours, like you said before, but a lot of times I can think of a couple of customers we've spoken to where we'll talk to a pocket of the organization, a comms manager in a particular country, and say, how is it working for you? And they'll say, that's great. We get this percentage reach, this open rate, that kind of thing. And then you go to another country and they're using a totally different tool with a totally different set of metrics. And then you speak to the higher ups and say, okay, how's it working for you? And they say, yeah, we think great, but they're all doing their own thing. They're all very
Mm.
siloed. And particularly in global organizations, we hear this every single day. So yeah, I think it's like you said before, the illusion of the communication, the culture. Very difficult to foster a universal culture if you're all working in silos and operating in silos and reading in silos. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic point. And what do we try and do to break that down is, well, we throw a bunch of technology, we throw a bunch of new tools at it, um, which helps to a degree until it doesn't. And so what we've kind of led to is like this vicious cycle, you may call it, of we have a problem, we throw technology at it, technology creates a problem, now we try and fix it with another technology and another tool, but we didn't get rid of the old one, and now, oh boy, that's how we lead to that tech stack just growing and growing, and the chat converse or responses we had before, where it's 7, 8, 10, too many to count tools. Some of them are now outdated because they're old ways, but hey, that office over there still uses that, so we can't get rid of it. That it's not integrated, or hey, this one it works for me, but it's really difficult to use for others, or they don't even have access to it, so they don't engage with it. But that's the only way that they can get information, or it creates the silos that we talked about, where we publish everything over here in one silo, but our frontline workers can't access that silo because they don't have licenses. Okay, great. Well, are we really even communicating with them at that point? So in the end, what we're talking about here is we want to simplify communications with technology and be very careful not to complicate it even more. And you got to think about that. What experience are we architecting with these tools and technology for our employees? And so just a couple stats to talk about that and the employee experience that we have found is this disconnection because of the reliance on technology. So 26% of employees, that's it, say that they are completely satisfied with their company's tools and technologies. Flip that over, that's 74% say that they aren't. So that's 3 out of every 4 says, no, man, I am not satisfied with what we have, which is kind of leading to this disconnection. And 82% of employees actually struggle to connect and even collaborate with their colleagues because of the different tools. And like you said, the different technology. So in one country it's this, in one country it's that, or could be offices in the same country or just across states, whatever it is. Could be different floors. It could be different teams use different technologies, and it's really making it difficult. And so what we want to do is we want to say goodbye to this. So just give me a hand raise if any of these quotes are familiar and something that you've heard across your office. So we're never going to move from SharePoint. We can't do that. Or I have no idea how to use that new CMS or insert thing here. Um, why do they get to use the AI features, but we don't get to use the AI features? I've heard that one. Or this is a fun one. I had to replace my Control V keys because I have copy paste done too many times, too many tools. Or yeah, I can publish it everywhere, but it's only in English. Or the final one I love, I hear this all the time, is why do they force us to use this? That thing doesn't work. Yeah, a lot of hand raises and thumbs up on that one. We hear a lot. So that's what we want to end these quotes, get rid of these quotes. So we want to move from that old way of creating this unique content and for each individual channel and using all these different technologies, and or going to force everybody to use that one tool that doesn't work, quote unquote, for everybody. And we want to start moving towards a new way, something that's more flexible. Something that we're talking about is omni-creation, where you can design your content that can be flexible and adapted to different formats and channels, but it doesn't matter where it actually originated. And that goes beyond the omni publishing. It's on the other side of things now, is the omni creation. Build it once, anywhere, and the tools that make sense for you and your team, and then publish it everywhere, but do it intelligently. And so that's what we want to really dive into. And for that, I will hand it over to Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you very much. Fair warning, I have got a slight cold/virus, so if I cough in the middle of the presentation, I apologize in advance. I'm also not thinking particularly clearly, so if I forget words, I also apologize in advance. I cannot control your screen, David. Could a second ago, and now I can't. There we go. Now I can. Okay, cool. So before I get into omni-creation, which is a term that I think we coined, if we're honest, and let's be completely honest, Gartner will come up with something much better this time next year. But ultimately, I think it's good to look at the omni-channel first, because we all know what omni-channel is. And omni-channel, when it's done right, when we see it done right by customers, can be extremely effective. You can create content once and reach users in many different places in a really successful way. There is a well-known marketing tool that, again, David will know better than me, but the rule of seven. The idea that a buyer or a consumer will have to see something 7 times before they buy it, or they sign up for it, or they join it. Now, it's not quite the same in the enterprise, I think, but that kind of principle is worth bearing in mind. So omni-channel done right, that you can reach somebody on their email or their phone or their desktop and target them, is great. The challenge comes when people believe omni-channel is create content once and publish it everywhere, every time. That's just good old-fashioned spam, and that really doesn't work. The users become blind to it. They think it's noisy, and they'll just ignore all comms. And I always think about, do you remember when Facebook first came out and you get an email for everything? Someone would poke you, you get 6 emails. You'd like something, you get 6 emails. You'd post a photo, you get 100 emails. Everyone just deleted all Facebook emails. You couldn't get an email from Facebook and read it because they went straight into spam. So again, omnichannel can be successful, but it has that pitfall of saying, okay, what happens if you do go over the top? What happens if you go too many? And the key is, as always, it's targeting. So this is what a good omnichannel strategy looks like, of course, from our perspective, because we're out of space, but creating that content once in a singular tool and distributing it to all the different parts of the business. And this is a Microsoft slide, but you might be a Google house, you might use Slack or Google. It doesn't matter. It's the same principle. Making sure that content is intelligently targeted to all these places, to SharePoint, to Outlook, to your intranet, to Teams, to the digital screens, to the kiosks. And this is great. And again, when it works, it's fantastic, but it does require everyone to create content in the same tool. Now, by the look of it, some of you have managed to do that. And that's what I think is kind of someone like me. That's my utopia. That's what I want, right? But ultimately, it's not always realistic. We've got customers such as some of the global banks who, when I sit down with them, they say, yeah, in Mexico, they use WordPress. But in Spain, they're using AppSpace. But in England, they're using Viva Engage. But in the US, they're using, and this kind of distributed and kind of almost disjointed set of tools can often cause confusion and headaches. So what we did, and what AppSpace have been trying to do, is trying to connect these disjointed content sources in a way that removes the headache and removes the friction from you, the content creator, but also from the end user as well. And the way that really looks now is like this. And the example is, you might have an HR team that use Workday. A lot of people use Workday. Workday is very common. We see it everywhere. It's not a comms tool. You might use it as a comms tool, or part of HR might use it as a comms tool, and it might be successful in a silo part of the organization. So they don't want to throw it away. And that's okay. And you might have that Mexican team who you still use WordPress. You might have that one guy in IT who loves creating content in SharePoint. No one loves creating content in SharePoint, but if you are that one guy in IT, that's okay. You can create that content in SharePoint. And what we're trying to do here at AppSpace is say, okay, let's take that content. Let's pull it in. We have this principle of passports, which I'll talk about later, but we connect it once, and then we'll run it through AppSpace, in our case, and then do the redistribution. Of course, targeting, making sure that we reach the right audiences is still crucial, but it's kind of removing the headache of the left-hand side of the screen. You're kind of bringing them all together. And when you're looking at omni-creation, and we've seen a couple of customers do this quite successfully now, there's a few things you really need to consider. So firstly, what are the channels? So what are the channels that are being used? Because a quick story, I once sat down with a police department in the UK. I'm not going to name them. And police officers were discussing crime reports via WhatsApp. Now, if that had got out to the newspapers, then that would have been a big no-no. You cannot do that in the UK. Whereas I had a customer last week say, can we add WhatsApp as a channel? So every organization is, of course, different, but ultimately you have to understand the channels before you decide to unite them. When you understand the channels and you understand where the users are, you can really start to get successful results. The one thing that I've noticed when I've seen customers do this, and it's predominantly using SharePoint as a source, as well as intranets and various other, my background is Microsoft, so I tend to work more with those customers, but the content structure doesn't necessarily matter. It's more the tone, it's more the cultural kind of language that matters. But even that can differentiate between different countries. You know, the Germans are a lot more to the point and formal than maybe the English are, for example. So using that content in kind of modular chunks that we can repurpose and redistribute is really, really useful. And of course, the most important part of it is making sure you know at the end result who's reading it and how they're reading it and where they're reading it. So how does that work? How have we done that in ourselves? And of course, it's not just an AppSpace thing. I'm sure you can do this without our technology, but something we've put a lot of effort into. We've come up with this idea of these things called passports. And basically, they've been around in AppSpace as long as David's worked for AppSpace, actually. But we've kind of involved them and improved them. And what we've done with these passports is said, okay, let's connect these data sources once as an admin, and then let's map them through AppSpace. So we ingest the content, we take it, and we understand the audiences that are behind it or that it was targeted for, and we personalize the content. In that case, that could mean adding another language. For example, you may be French Canadian. I think I saw some French Canadian, some Canadians on the call. You may be French Canadian, and you may have content in SharePoint, but you may also have a Parisian office. Who's going to be annoyed? Because SharePoint only gives you one French. You don't have French Canadian and French, so someone's annoyed. So what we can do is we can take that content, convert it into French Canadian and French, and redistribute it to the right audiences. And similarly, that same SharePoint content could maybe reach a frontline worker who doesn't have a Microsoft license. So we're taking the content, we're improving it by sometimes adding different languages, we're personalizing it by, again, adding different languages, and we're adding things like narration, so that frontline worker can listen in their AirPods, as opposed to having to read it on the screen on the way to work. AI can help with a number of different things. And we're not here to talk about AI in any great detail, but AI can do so many things that I think very few organizations are looking at it for. For example, really simple one, alt text. Hands up if you understand all of the Section 508 principles. Very few people do. It's very gray. It's not black and white. And in the UK, we don't even call it Section 508. We call it WCAG 2.1 or 2.2 AA, and that's the European standards. But ultimately, as good as a tool is, and as accessible as a tool is, that's only as accessible as the content creator. What if the content creator has no idea what an alt text is? AI can help you with that as well. It can enhance the content. It can do things like add alt text as well. And of course, the most important part of AI for us when we're looking at these kind of things is data understanding. How do we understand the data to make better decisions next time with the content creation? So AI can obviously create content. We know that. We've all played with ChatGPT. We're all familiar with Gemini, or most of us. Even my father the other day, I caught using Gemini. So, it's definitely mainstream now. But ultimately, you can create content. We all know that. That's great. but we can also add translations. And for those of you who are still using Azure for translation or AWS or whatever technology you're using, give Gen AI a try, because we have a number of very large Fortune 500 customers that have slogans that don't always translate into other languages. They can be misinterpreted. Gen AI does a great job of cleaning that up. It really does. It can soften potential warmongery statements that some of our slogans that some of our customers have. And then, of course, not just the translation, but also the delivery of the content. So, what if David reads it on his desktop in the office, but then he walks into the office? Does he see the same content on the big digital screen? Well, he can. We can understand if he's read it on the digital screen. We can understand if he's read it on his phone. And more importantly, we can understand the source of that data. So we can track it right the way back to it was created in WordPress, but it was read in a factory in XYZ. So that data and being able to manipulate it using AI allows us to make better decisions moving forward. But ultimately, none of this matters if you're not personalizing the content. Personalization has always been key to successful strategies. It always has been. And there is no one size fits all to personalization, because we're living in an era now where we have genuinely got customers doing amazing things. For those of you not familiar with the term narrowcasting, I'd never heard of it, but you can walk into a meeting room and the content on the meeting room screen knows that it's you and shows you content for you because your phone in your pocket is talking to the meeting room screen. Like, this is genuinely exists today. We have customers doing this today, but also understanding when an audience member reads the content. I had a call with a customer last week, and they're replacing another vendor, and that vendor has an algorithm baked in to say when someone read the content, it disappears from the newsfeed. No, I hate that. I have to read things 3 times before I even remember it. My wife has to tell me things 10 times at least before I remember it. So ultimately, you can't read content once and take it in. Being able to target that content to the big screen, to your phone, to the desktop, that's how people will take that comms in. It doesn't have to be blanket, it has to be targeted, but it can be on many different mediums or devices. Maybe it's Teams, maybe it's an email. And these are the benefits that we found from the few customers that have started to adopt this already. Number one, and David alluded to this before, I don't want to use that tool. I don't know if any of you still use WordPress. I had the pleasure of using Elementor in WordPress a while back. God awful. Takes forever to load. I cannot understand how it still exists, but it does. And so people are very happy with it. And that's okay, because there's an awful lot of functionality you can do with it. But if I don't like it and you tell me to create content in it, I'm not going to be as efficient. I'm not going to be able to create the content that I'm used to creating. So trying to funnel everyone to the same tool, as much as it is my utopia and as much as it's many of our utopia, it's sometimes not always possible. And maybe it's not just because Luddites like myself don't want to learn technology. Maybe it's more because there's a certain governing reason they can't use it, because a particular council says no. Or, for example, Germany, where the Workers' Council won't allow you to understand the end user data who's read it. So little things like that matter. So instead of trying to force everyone to use a single tool, let's try and control it, of course, by all means, but let's allow them to create the content where they live. They'll be more productive. And then by making sure that that content is funneled and redistributed to the entire organization, that guy who loves creating content in SharePoint that's published it can now be read by the frontline worker in the factory who doesn't have a Microsoft license. This is key. You're getting a stronger culture because everyone is able to feel the same story, read the same vision. I actually wrote a piece about 5 years ago now, and it was called "What Does Ted Lasso Know About?" I didn't choose a title, marketing did. What does Ted Lasso know about employee comms? And I basically, I'm a big soccer fan because I'm British and we all are. But I wrote that from the perspective of football teams have to cater, or soccer teams have to cater for fans all around the world and give them this sense of identity and belonging. And the same thing applies for internal comms. You often have to cater for all different walks of life, different age groups, different countries, languages, cultures, and you have to give them the sense of identity, belonging, and culture that the organization has. It's very difficult if you're creating content that the factory workers simply can't read. So the stronger culture aspect is a big one. And of course, I shouldn't say this, but you might not have to buy more licenses from AppSpace, because you may not need to go and create all of that content in AppSpace. You may already have it in SharePoint or WordPress or whatever. So you can potentially reduce costs. Now, sometimes it might be an interim stopgap. You might absolutely desperately want to get rid of WordPress because the license renewal is due whenever, and that's okay. You can still do it piecemeal. But ultimately, understanding all of this is the key to success. So looking at that piece of content that was written in SharePoint, that was read on the factory floor, was read 3 times by 3 people on their mobile phone, that allows us to make an informed decision next time about which tools we're using and where we're creating the content. And of course, that leads us nicely into the analytics piece. We hugely invested in analytics earlier this year, and then obviously tied that back into what we're doing with AI. But I think it really starts to become interesting for the internal comms manager when they start to understand where exactly that content is being consumed, what time of day, and how. I'll give you a quick example. We've got an audio transcription feature, and I thought it was a kind of nice, cool feature. Like, yeah, it's fun, right? You can listen instead of reading. And one of our customers that I spoke to, 80% of their users were listening instead of reading, and that was like, wow, that's an awful lot. That is a huge number. It was only in a specific part of the organization, but it was a huge result to find out, wow, people are actually wanting to listen. Now, that audience was a lot younger. And apparently younger audiences don't read. They prefer to listen to podcasts and audiobooks. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine, because understanding that allows you to make the informed decision next time. So tracking the engagement of where people are consuming the content, how they're consuming it, and then going back to source allows you to make those decisions. But more important than that, when AI can start to make recommendations and say, hey, do you know that if you publish that an hour earlier, your email will get a 5% bump? Or do you know if you added email to the distribution list of this, then you would get a 3% bump, because that's what happened with the previous story in the other channel or whatever it might be. So again, understanding that link between what you're seeing with the analytics and what you should do next time is something we've always had to do manually. And now AI is helping to bridge that gap as well. Okay, so this is, I've already touched on it briefly, but this is an example we have with a company that has a factory worker, and this is exactly what I mentioned before. So this company was a SharePoint intranet. They're using AppSpace for other parts of their digital signage and the space reservation. But one of the things they wanted to do was use our comms tool to try and reach the frontline worker. And there was an awful lot of content that was already created in SharePoint. And one of the things that they managed to do was, by connecting it through AppSpace, the frontline worker started to read that content on their mobile phone, on the break room, on the kiosk, via the QR code. And that content previously wasn't even available to them. That meant that the company had a kind of more awareness of what was going on. In fact, funnily enough, that company was one of the companies that pushed us to go a bit of a step further. So by taking the SharePoint content and being able to read it without that Microsoft license, and as that frontline worker was a big win for them, but they actually said, we want more. And based on that, and also based on obviously Meta retiring their platform, we're building AppSpace Live. The idea that we can do the live stream from a senior manager or something like that, and we can distribute that to everyone, regardless of license, regardless of whether or not they're a frontline worker or a transient worker or a contractor or a full-time worker. So the customers that are seeing success with this are actually pushing us to be even better and do even more. And the other thing I mentioned before is key here as well. I mean, there are a lot of factory workers or frontline workers who don't have English as their native language. And all the traditional SharePoint content was created in English, because SharePoint makes you choose the base language, and then you can add, of course, many languages to it, but very few companies were. So by us automatically doing that for them and adding all the different translations, it allowed the Polish workers, the Hispanic workers, the French workers to listen to that content or read that content in their own language. The end result, of course, is, well, not of course, but their attrition rate went down. So attrition rates in factories and frontline, as most of you will probably know, is pretty high. But reducing that was a huge removal of burden for the customer in question. Okay, so what if you want to do it? What if you want to get started and look at how do we do this omni-creation? And again, omni-creation, please, if you have a better name for it, pop it in the chat. It's a very new name for us, so I'm not in love with it, but I feel it kind of tells the story. So omni-creation, how can you start it yourself? Firstly, understand what you have. You have to audit the existing channels. And again, some of them may not be fit for purpose, and that needs to be nipped in the bud. Some of them may be okay, and you may have pockets of the business who like using them, and that's fine. In most cases, companies like, for example, Workday, which is a great HRIS, HR want to continue to use that. That's fine. How do we connect that? And then, of course, combining them. Some you simply can't, right? Any customers using SAP for anything, you can't connect it to anything. I'm sorry, it's just too difficult. SAP is not the most friendly when it comes to APIs. And then, of course, once you've got the understanding of where the content is being read and also created, then we need to look at our content strategy. And that's really basic, and most of you guys will probably do that a lot. So we're probably touching on all ground, but looking at the content strategy from a more 50,000 feet view often allows you to uncover things that maybe you hadn't realized before. And then always reiterate, there's no such thing as a finished digital workplace, intelligent workplace, intranet. I mean, the names alone change every 2 years. So the actual solutions, the tools, the products we're using, they're always evolving. They always have to be. 3 years ago, I used to see everyone wanting integrations. And you still see that to a certain extent today. Today, there's a lot of questions about generative AI. Four years ago, it was about, what did Microsoft call it? There was a product they released that doesn't exist today. But ultimately, what I'm saying is that the market's always moving. It's always changing. Measure the results, reiterate, and adapt. And again, without teaching you guys to suck eggs, this is ultimately one of the things we recommend when we're sitting down with customers around how to come up with your communication strategy. So obviously, understand who you're going to be targeting and where. And I think working backwards is good. One of the first things I say to our customers when they put in AppSpace is, let's start with the audiences. Let's not start with the features. Let's not start with the bells and whistles of any of the product features. Let's start with, who do you want to target and how are you going to reach them? And often that could just be Active Directory, because Active Directory in every organization is the perfect source of truth. That's not true. No one's Active Directory is the perfect source of truth. And if it is, congratulations to you, because you're the first customer I've ever heard who has. But ultimately, understanding that Active Directory and making sure that you can tie it into your HRIS or however you do it, coming up with those audiences on day one is key, because once you have those audiences, everything else can reach them. Then, of course, understand what is the kind of voice you want to have, the culture, the tone of voice, the kind of the lexicon, the language that you want to use. And then, excuse me, told you about it, cold. And then, of course, make sure that the content is reaching them. Use the analytics, use the data, use the AI, and if not, adapt, change, and manipulate. Okay, so I think that's pretty much the end, but I've got a few more just to finish off. Some recommendations we would say, as I mentioned before, if you've got SAP, don't worry about it. But ultimately, as long as the product has a flexible API, you should be able to connect it in some way, shape, or form. If you find that there's only 3 people reading it, maybe it's not worth connecting. Maybe it's worth just saying those 3 people can't use that tool anymore. If there's 1,000 people or 2,000 people or 10,000 people that seem to like that tool or consume content in that tool, you have to understand how to adapt, how to integrate it as well. And then, of course, the end result is you still want that unified platform. You still want the UI, the UX to look and feel the same. So whether it's AppSpace or another product, you want to unify it through that single UI if you can. Now, it doesn't mean it has to stop there. You can push back to SharePoint. You can push back to Teams. I have customers, and again, it's predominantly IT, but IT tend to live in Teams. So we have to reach them in Teams. And I don't just mean in the app in Teams, I mean in their chat. Let's pervasively interrupt their day and their chat with that big announcement or that comms information that's specifically for IT. So interrupting the actual channel or the Teams team, stupid name, the Teams team, interrupting that is a really, really key way to do it. And of course, if you need help with this, AppSpace is always here to help. We're happy to take any calls and talk to you guys about it. There are a few case studies on our website. This is just a couple of examples. For those of you who've seen myself or David speak before, you may have seen us speak with one of these customers. And also, we're going to share with you a report after this session, which is the statistics that David mentioned. But I think just to kind of recap, and David, you feel free to jump in here. Omnichannel can work. It absolutely can. But I think we see it fail a lot because of the lack of targeting. In all honesty, it's relevancy that's key, which is what David said before. Omni-creation is a new tool. It's a new idea. It's a new theory, if you will. But it's a way for us to connect all these disparate sources and unify them across one single organization. And by doing this, you're going to get more engagement. Your users, whether they are frontline workers in a factory or desk workers or people working from home, will feel more connected to the organization. And a connected organization is one that stays together. Attrition rates go down. People are more happy. People tend to understand what their company is trying to achieve. There are a few stats I was going to throw in here. I read a report in the Financial Times a few weeks ago about, what makes a happy workplace. But one of the overriding things, other than salary, of course, is understanding what your company is trying to achieve, understanding the message, the culture is. What is it that we are actually trying to do? And yeah, of course, if you can, embrace omni-creation, or again, come up with a better name. Either one, really.
Yeah, I agree. I think just to add to that is what we talked about before is that all of this really comes down to the experience your employees are having, right? Through your communications. I'd also like, speaking of better names, we always refer to it as content. Is everybody cool with that word? Like, are we okay with calling it content all the time, or is there a better word we should be saying? I say communications, I say content, but feel free to let us know. Hey, we got at least one thumbs up. Um,
Excellent. Few
I just
thumbs.
it feels like if we say it all the time, it's overused. So I'm glad to hear that it still resonates. But I'm sure that's going to get changed in the future. So absolutely. Well,
Excellent.
speaking of content, we do have more content for you to read. Like we were saying before, all the stats are from this workplace experience trends report that we do. So feel free to go download that. It should also be maybe a link in the chat. I think maybe Josh is putting that in there, but feel free to go in there, and there's a lot to learn. But with that, that ends it. I think we have some time for some questions. John, what did we have come in today?
So again, if anybody has any questions of today's speakers, use that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get anything that we don't get to today, we'll give to the team for follow-up afterwards. First question here. Now, you mentioned the inconsistency of communication across channels. What are some of the most common pain points internal communicators experience due to this, and how does omni-creation help alleviate them?
That's good. Dave, do you have a specific answer to that, or do you want me to go?
You go first.
Yeah, I think the the biggest thing that omni-creation I think helps with it, the idea, the concept here is that different tools. There are so many different tools, and you don't use them the same way. So as a communicator, what you can do in like Elementor and Web and WordPress, you can't do in SharePoint, and vice versa. And so you're saying, okay, I have to go create it here, then I have to go copy and paste and then put it over here, but I have to change it because it doesn't format, doesn't look the same way. And then this doesn't have that language. So I think that's what you run into, is that you have all these tools to use, but they just all function differently. And with this concept of being able to use whatever tool that works best for you, and then pulling that in to get enriched and with AI, and then publishing it intelligently, that kind of removes that challenge and removes that pain point of trying to figure out how each tool works the best for you as a communicator to create your content and then deliver it.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that as well is my job is obviously speaking to these customers day in, day out, and it sounds silly, but people don't like change. I mean, if we're being honest, people aren't hugely fans of change. And there's organizations that we speak to that have what my colleague deems as the rebels. And the rebels are saying, no, we're not going to change. We use Viva, or we use Facebook, or whatever it might be, right? But we use that tool. We're not going to change. We're not going to move over to AppSpace. We're not going to move over to, well, we don't know what it is. So what we're saying is that's okay. Like, you don't have to necessarily fight against the rebels. You can bring them with you.
Hmm.
You can bring them in. You can make them all happy. That's the plan of omni creation.
You really are Star Trek or Star Wars guy now, huh?
I am now. Yeah, I've changed. Andor's changed me.
Next question. For internal comms teams with limited resources, what's one key area where focusing on omni-creation principles could yield the biggest initial impact?
Hmm. So go ahead, or Fletcher, if you got it.
No,
But
after you. After you.
I was going to say that one more time.
Sure. So for internal comms teams with limited resources, what's one key area where focusing on omni-creation principles could yield the biggest initial impact?
My only example that comes to mind is SharePoint. I mean, that's where I live my life, right? So I think I've seen. Look, I love SharePoint, right? It's given me a career, but it has a lot of limitations, and a lot of frustrations for a lot of organizations. And I think one of the things we found is when you connect SharePoint as that source to AppSpace, you can remove a few of the challenges. So instead of having to target the content every single time, instead of having to take certain languages out or not have certain languages, instead of having to worry about the layout and the way that it displays on different devices and different screens and different displays, they can just plug it in once. Like it removes that headache. So this smaller team doesn't have to go in each individual time and create and target and manipulate things in different sizes and upload different image sizes in order for it to work everywhere. We'll just sort of take care of all of that. So I think that's one of the biggest time and cost savers is when you're adding a source like SharePoint that maybe has some sort of limitation and making it a little bit more unified, a little bit easier and a little bit more universal to work everywhere. That's the quick example that comes to my mind.
Yeah, just to add to that, the one thing I've been kicking around this idea and I haven't really nailed on how to say it, but essentially what I feel like it does is it supercharges the tools you already have.
Yeah.
Because SharePoint or whatever tool you're using to create your communications and your content may not have AI, or you may not be able to use AI, or for example, or but then you pull it into app space or you pull it into somewhere where it can enrich that using different tools. Now you've kind of given a feature and functionality to that tool that you can't get away from. You've added to it instead of having to wait for SharePoint to add a feature. You have it in this connected hub like an app space. So I like this. I've been kicking around this idea of like, hey, it can supercharge what you already have and give you features that you maybe don't have access to.
Next question. AI seems central to the omni-creation concept. Beyond translation, what are some other practical ways AI can assist internal communicators in creating and distributing content more effectively?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh, go on.
That
After you.
no, 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 no. We both always want to jump in. Go ahead. You first. You
Yeah, yeah.
first.
So on this one, I think I touched on it a little bit in my session, but I'm a big fan of trying to remove just mundane tasks that people don't necessarily know how to do. So the example I gave before around accessibility, like very few people understand accessibility. So AI can remove a headache there. But also there's so much data. There is so much data to sift through. And the analytics that we give our customers, there's just so much. Like you could go into each individual story and look at the read rate and who clicked on it, where and when and how far. And I think if you were to sit down and try and understand every single user interaction, it would take you a week for each story. It would be too much. So I think AI is really changing the game when you're starting to get meaningful recommendations back from all of the data that exists. That's what AI can do very well, right? I mean, LLMs are large language models. They can understand large amounts of language, large amounts of data, and they can make recommendations based on that. So I'm seeing that at the moment as the biggest win AI can give us is removing the headache of we know that it's red over here at 3 o'clock because we created it and we saw in the analytics, but when the next time I'm creating it, I might not remember that. I need AI to tell me. I need AI to remind me of those things. That's a big one for me.
Yeah. I just to add to it, the one like super practical use of AI because we always talk in such big things that we can do with AI, but like super practical is in this omni-creation model where you create it anywhere, you pull it in, is it automatically adds tags to your content so that it's easy to find later. And I've seen so many companies where they try and utilize tags, and even internally, we try and utilize tags or
Great point.
some form of tags and labels, and then they just get unwieldy. You have one that's got an S on the end, and one that doesn't, and all of a sudden nobody remembers which tags you have. And AI does a really good job of applying those tags and labels to your content already to make it so much easier to find. And so that's one of those like super practical real world examples where I find like AI to be super helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And there's actually one more that when you're talking, I thought of that I use every day that I take for granted. I do a lot of demos. I spend my life doing demonstrations and with speaking to customers. And I used to have an entire folder full of Pexels images because I don't want to get sued for using an image that's got royalties on it, right? So I have this entire folder full of Pexel images. Now, once the body of text is there, I just click AI generate image. Like that has removed so much time and effort and headache from me is I now have images that are grounded, that understand the context, and are based on the body of text that already exists. So yeah, that's been a big win for me as well.
Alexis in the group chat said that I've used AI to help edit transcripts for leadership videos. It's been a huge time saver and makes the whole
Mm,
Yeah.
process more efficient.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a great one.
And summaries are great too. AI created summaries for long articles. For those that don't read, or the audio is really cool too. I agree, Dave. When that first came out, I was like, who's going to listen to this? Who's going to use this? But that's been a real thing where you're on your run, you put on the audio, and you can kind of listen to your news feed from your company. Very cool feature that has been used a lot more than I even expected.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question. So can you elaborate on how a unified platform like AppSpace facilitates the principles of omni-creation by connecting different content sources and communication channels?
Yeah, we have we refer to it in an AppSpace world. We refer to a lot of engines. We have a distribution engine, we have a rules engine, we have all these engines that the product team likes to talk about. But in the end, it's really just being able to set up exactly how you want to ingest your content that you're creating. So you have that flexibility to use anything you want, but you pull it in a way that makes sense through the right filters. So you're only pulling in the correct content because you might not want it all. But then and you're enriching it again according to the rules, and then you're publishing it according to rules and permissions. So that's where, like we said before, getting your SharePoint content that's behind a user license, exposing that to frontline workers, but not exposing the stuff that should be behind user licenses. Having a central hub that allows you to add those rules, those filters, to really pinpoint it. I think that's where having a centralized hub can really help you with that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't add anything to that. I think it always comes down to, and look, migration is a dirty word, right? It really is. But ultimately, it's mapping, it's understanding A and B. And once you do that once, little two columns side by side, then the rest of it's relatively simple.
Yeah.
Looks like we have time for one last question. What advice would you give to teams working in highly regulated industries like finance, where strict security protocols can limit access to modern apps and tools?
So my entire customer base for many years was finance. Like that I would say is our biggest customer base still today. So yeah, very familiar with some of those rules and challenges, and yeah, some of the biggest banks in the world use AppSpace, and yeah, we know we feel your pain. Um, so I think ultimately you can't expect to use all the latest and greatest in AI straight away. That's obviously very difficult for most financial organizations, although we are seeing an about turn. We have a couple of banks recently turn everything on in our platform within AI. But I think also you don't have to use everything at once. Like our tool, and I think a lot of tools have been built so that you can basically turn things on or off as you go. I had a bank that we are going live with at the moment. They're only a small bank, but they go live at the moment, and they're starting with the most simple layout you can imagine, and then sort of adding things incrementally as they go. But from our perspective, mine and Dave's job, we don't have to necessarily too much worry about the CIO side of things and security because we've got all of the accreditations you're going to need. We've got all of the ISOs and everything else. So that goes, of course, to the CISO and they'll review it. And yeah, the customer base we have tends to make it very easy. But advice for you guys, just start small, but have in mind that you can turn these things on as and when the company allows for it. Anything to add, David?
No, I think that's great. Test it out, right? Like don't boil, don't try and go beyond what your security and get around your security measures and all that. Start within what you are allowed to do, and see how that works, and then show and get feedback of using that tool of where you could improve by adding another feature, whether it's AI or something that's behind a license or permissions. But a lot of that's controlled, right? And really explore the permissions and be mindful of like user roles and how you set that up, whether it's location, whether it's by team, or whatnot. But take advantage of those features that are built into a lot of these platforms, where you can set that up ahead of time. And so you have these audiences that already have the security baked into it based on their user roles and permissions.
That's it. Audiences are key because if you can show that certain audiences can't see certain things, I think you're already on to a winner.
Yeah.
And one of the first features that gets turned on by a lot of the financial organizations is actually the audio transcription. And that's because 9 times out of 10, it's a real person that's written the content. The audio transcription is just transcribing it. It's not feeding an LLM, it's just transcribing that content that exists there.
Well, that brings our time together today to a close. As a reminder to our audience, you'll receive the materials from today's session and a survey within 24 to 48 hours. Please take 2 minutes to fill out that survey to help us with future topics. On behalf of Reagan Communications and AppSpace, thank you for attending today's session and have a great rest of your day.